Welcome to AFL Uncensored. I'm your host, Teej Johannesson, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Omari Fraser. Omari, kind of big news out of the ARG Irish camp this week. Unfortunately, our two biggest news breaks of the last 2 weeks have been players not playing. So Brandon Lay last week with the Bucks, and now this week, unfortunately, Connor Lutz has announced that he won't be playing this year due to an injury he sustained last year that he's still coming back from. So obviously, that is a big loss for ARG. Connor is a bowling ball of a running back. Now they do still have Tyler Shaver there and Marshall as well, so they'll still have a very good running game. But your initial thoughts when you heard that, I know you know that team and a lot of those players, and they're probably pretty disappointed, obviously, that he can't make it out this year.
Yeah, that's a big loss for the run game. I know Connor does a lot with, just when I think of him last year, he was definitely one of the more polished backs on his technique and everything, and how he ran the ball and how he was always a force. And it was just another dynamic to their run game last year. And so a big part of it to it. So, unfortunately with the injury that he sustained last year. And, I think I had a brief conversation with him, I think the following week when he has injury, just to see how he is. And he mentioned that, I'm not sure if he went for surgery. But he said that things are good. They're healing. I think I saw a video of him like a few weeks earlier, still lifting and training. So I'm sure it's just a matter where he wants to get back to a point where he feels like he can come back at the same level and go from there. But it's a big loss for them. But if it's a team that can handle a loss of a player, it is the Irish, because they are loaded just with the guys that, like Tyler Shaver. I know there's other guys too in the backfield. So they got a good committee of backs that can easily step up to the plate and carry forward on their plans for a big run game.
Yeah, and of course they still have the running quarterback, so they'll always kind of have two running backs back there. But disappointing for Connor. I know that he's going to stick around and help with the team. He's a good dude and a good part of our league. So I hope Connor, if you're listening, that you heal up quickly and you'll be back again soon for all of us. Omari, I know you had mentioned something that you wanted to talk about as well.
Yes, yeah, I had a great friend of mine who reached out and actually plays from Airdrie too, Billy Duffy. He was just shooting me a message and said, hey man, it'd be great he wanted to get some feedback on an idea that he had where I think it'd be beneficial for the league. And I kind of want to approach this to where, I'll explain it and we'll dive into a bit of it here. And, for those who have interest in or want to talk about it more, definitely go on the Facebook Uncensored group chat or where this was posted and comment there, because it'd be good to gauge how the community feels about it. But the idea he had was to bring a AFL league camp to preseason, which would be something now to where the camp would be located somewhere central. I think he mentioned Red Deer or Central Alberta. I think just going back with him, I mentioned Edmonton, but just a place to where anyone who's in the league, maybe at that point you can make it just a men's football camp at that point, definitely for the AFL, but a place where guys can come, get coaching, get some development, meet other guys in the other teams, grow the community, and just have it be something now that would be a place like a primer for guys before they go to their season, where they can either freshen up on their skills. I know there's probably a lot of logistical stuff to work through with that, like which team, which area to go to, and where to have it over the weekend, all that stuff. But I like the idea of it to where guys can come together, get better, get coached from, high caliber coaches, and go back to their teams and use that for the following season, just only to raise the game even more. So it was a good idea, and I'm sure there'd be a lot of talk on that and how it can work.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I've never actually thought about that. And so it's cool that I know that he reached out to you because of listening to the podcast and understanding the reach that we're having in the league, which has been great. But I think that's a good starting point, and maybe there's some guys out there that can kind of come up with some ideas of maybe a way to do that or a way to make that kind of happen, or what people think about that. So I think that's hopefully what this podcast does is start conversations on doing things like that and building up our league. So yeah, really interesting. So thanks, Brian. Did you say his name was?
Billy Duffy. Billy gets a shout out here on the O-line at ARG Irish. So they've been drumming up a lot of news, but it'd be definitely interesting to hear the feedback of other people in the league and how we can make that work. I do think it would serve the league in that front on higher quality of play, which it would only attract more attention to us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So thank you for that. And I think if you have ideas out there for the league, like send messages to me and Omari, either our personal accounts or Facebook accounts or the Instagram AFL Uncensored. If you haven't followed AFL Uncensored on Instagram, do that. We post, or Omari takes care of that and does a good job of posting the reels and stuff like that. And so that's really awesome. So please follow us there. And send us your ideas, anything with the league, because we'll talk about it on the podcast, and then hopefully we get some discussion going. Because I know the board members also listen to the podcast as well. So awesome. Let's get into the episode. So today I'm really excited. We've got a guy on the episode who's been around football for a long time, and he's been around the AFL and in a lot of different roles, including president of the league, including running a team and winning some championships and coming within 2 points of winning 2 national championships. So I'm really excited to have Kurt Howland on the podcast today. Kurt, how you doing?
Doing good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I know a lot of people have been asking to hear from you, and we're going to dive into some cool stuff today. So I know this is going to be interesting, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So first off, Kurt, your football story, and because we only have one guest, you can kind of take your time with it today. Like, what brought you into football? What brought you into the AFL? And then we'll go from there.
So yeah, I started playing football from Florida. Started playing there when I was 6. Played youth football all the way up through into high school. Went and played college football at a small school in Georgia. I had gotten back from school and started working, and a friend of mine, his father actually started semi-pro, which is, that name gets thrown around where really it's just men's football. It's senior men's football. It wasn't anybody getting paid, but I didn't really know anything about it at the time. Went out and tried out for the team, ended up playing there for a while. And then we ended up actually merging with a team in Orlando called the Orlando Phantoms, which within minor league football in the U.S. ended up being a really successful team. And then so I got married to my wife in Florida. She's from Canada. We decided to come up here for work, and found the Gators. I actually contacted the Gators through my wife's like a family member played for the team, contacted them, and I actually came up expecting just to like check it out. The season was pretty much over, and come to find out the team had actually dressed somebody and said they were me. So I came up here and they're like, "Oh, we want you to play for the playoffs." And I'm just like, "Is that okay? Like, what is like, what are the implications of this?" And they're just like, "Oh yeah, well, it's all right. You can come up and play." And then I came out and played, and been here ever since. So it's been about 10 years playing.
So we just had a first on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We have admitting that there might have been a little bit of shadery going on with player eligibility at one time or another in the AFL. So that is shocking to hear. I hope you can sense the sarcasm in my voice, but I'm glad we're finally admitting that. So that is hilarious. What year was that, Kurt, that you came out?
2012.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I will say, like, I have definitely some stories. I've been around the league. People, for some reason, like, I'm easy to talk to. Teams from all over the league want to tell me the information that they have around the league. So I'm going to definitely tell some stories today. I'll try to, I think the stories that I have, I think at this point, like, enough time has passed where it's not that big of a deal. And I don't mean to like ruffle any feathers, but I've got stories to tell. I think people like hearing them. So
yeah, and that's what we're about here. And ruffling feathers is fine. And you're right, like time is fine. So
yeah, the statute of limitations is long past, so you're good.
And I know obviously it's one of those things where, like, sometimes as a human, you're like, I can't say this, and it feels good to actually get it out. So the first thing I want to talk about, actually, Kurt, is this podcast is not the first time the AFL's had a podcast. So the idea, it did come from you, and you actually, I believe, were president of the league when you were running the first AFL podcast. So talk about that a little bit. Yeah. And what year that was.
I think it would have been 2016. So it was before podcasting. Like, obviously there was definitely people podcasting, but it was still new. I think over the last, like, probably 3 or 4 years, it's taken off to where everybody listens to, podcasts. But yeah, I had, I was probably listening to like the Joe Rogan podcast, like stuff like that. And I was just trying to find ways to get the word out about the AFL and like, just kind of way to market the league and get more interest. Like I had actually started the AFL news page and the CMFL news page. Like that was never anything involved with the leagues. I was just like, you know what? I think it would be good for the leagues. Like I still run them, try to share everything that I can and like get the word out. And, I just, did it because I felt it just something to help the league. So yeah, I did it on, I think it was SoundCloud. Yeah, SoundCloud, and did it for a season. Would have guys on, like I would kind of pick like game of the week, and I would have like one of the players from each team on for that week, and did a quick interview, asked some questions. I think some guys at that point too, I feel like now, because people listen to podcasts and they're always listening to people talk, I think it's a little bit easier for a lot of people to conversate in that way. There was a couple guys that I had on where it was like one word answers for everything, and I was like, all right, this is not
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so I did that for a season. Like at that time, like I said, I mean, podcasting wasn't as big. I wasn't all that great at it, but it just kind of lasted for a season and it went away. But yeah, that was the first AFL podcast. I'm sure if you looked it up somewhere on SoundCloud somewhere, they're probably still up there because I never took them down. So
Yeah,
they're probably really bad too. So
yeah, I do remember. I totally remember listening to those, and I would look forward to them because the games of the week were cool, and that's kind of what I've had the idea to start the podcast for a couple of years now, but I just didn't have the I guess the startup to get going. And once I met Omari last year and realized he had some experience in podcasts and he was good at a lot of the social media stuff, and so it just kind of made sense, and it's been really good. And so I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for the OG start to the podcast and the idea. So
well, I gotta say, when I had heard that you guys were starting a podcast, I saw it somewhere. Maybe somebody shared it, and I was like, oh, we'll see. And then I thought about like, oh, I got stories to tell, and maybe it'd be cool to go on there. And then I listened, and I was like, you guys are actually pretty damn good at it. Like, and you're getting better every time. I mean, just from listening, I kind of started at the beginning and started listening through episodes, and you could tell, it just gets more natural and more comfortable as you guys go on. So I was happy to come on once I listened, because I was like, I would have definitely been diplomatic, but if it would have been a bad product, I would have probably just said, I'll pass. But you guys, you guys are doing a really good job. I've been listening every week. I was very impressed.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kurt. I really do. And I know Omari does too. We do work hard at this, and we're trying to bring entertainment to people. So firstly, I guess we want to get into stories, and I know people want to hear them. So let's get into them. So first story. Apparently, the Wolfpack tried to get the Gators and Daryl Leeson and other pack members suspended for the season when they came over to play for you guys. Now, for those that don't know, there was a time when Daryl Leeson and a former podcast guest named Ryan Belrose swapped from the Wolfpack to the Calgary Gators, who a lot of people may not know. That there was a team called the Calgary Gators who was very good, that no longer in the league. But that was a pretty big switch. And I remember at the time, I saw the Facebook post and I can picture it in my brain, Kurt. It was a picture of Ryan Barrows and Daryl Leeson standing and holding Gators jerseys. I don't know if you remember that picture, but it got posted and I was like, what is happening? So talk about that.
Yeah, I took that picture. So it goes back to where after the 2014 season, that was when the Airdrie Irish were being formed, and there was a lot of behind the scenes with the guys that started the Irish were already in the plans of starting the team, like while the season was going on from the 14 season going into 15. I had started hearing a bit about it around the national championship. I feel like I'm pretty sure I had reached out to Daryl at the time because, in 14, we had a really good team. We had a safety playing quarterback, Liam Greeny, who took us to a national championship in 13. And he's a great person and a great football player, but he was playing out of position. We needed a quarterback. And I just came to him and said, listen, like, realistically, I'm hearing all these guys are wanting to start a team, which never really made sense to me at the time because Daryl was such a good player. He just won them the AFL to beat us in the 14 championship. But certain guys had this thing set in their heads that, they could run team better and could do better without him. So I reached out to him. It was a lot of long talk, and sitting around and we had a couple meetings, and then finally I guess they kind of took a poll of who was coming back and who wasn't. And, there was only a handful of guys sticking around. So they decided to come over to the Gators. And then funny enough, a week later, not even a week, it was probably about 3 or 4 days later, Jordan Heather signs up to play for our team. And then it was like, we're looking for a quarterback. We get Daryl coming now. We get a guy that won the Heck Crichton, and we've got to try to keep 2 quarterbacks happy, which was a challenge in itself. But as the season was getting closer, I started hearing rumblings about, just that something was going to happen with the league. And, there's just some people sending me messages that weren't really telling me, but I knew something was up, that something was going on. And then I started hearing about guys from the Wolfpack wanting to go after Daryl and Ryan and make it to where we would be playing ineligible players, and then it would become a whole thing. So I reached out to a couple of people that knew what was going on. And what had happened was Ryan Belrose and Daryl Leeson were the main, I think, president and vice president of the team. They essentially had kind of told Jim Lightfoot and Rob Sherman, who were part of the Wolfpack before Jim had stepped away. They said, listen, we're looking to move on. Everybody's kind of left. Like, there's some money left in the team. I think we're just going to shut the team down. And the way it works within a nonprofit society or whatever is whatever money is left over within the team, everybody has to split. Whoever is still in good standing with the team would have to split the money up, and then the team is dissolved. Well, I guess the Wolfpack and Daryl had a meeting. Jim Lightfoot didn't want the Wolfpack to go away, so they decided that they wanted to keep the Wolfpack running, and they did. And it's good that they did. They went from bottom dwellers to they won the AFL in 2019 or 20 or whatever year that was. But I guess what had happened was Daryl just said, I've got money into the team, sponsorships and all that. Like, I'm taking my money out of the team and I'm putting it towards fees for the Gators, which at the time I didn't know about. I didn't know that all these guys were doing that. And he just essentially said, like, either I'm going to do that, or as the board, we have the right to dissolve the team. So the Wolfpack, I guess, agreed to that, but we're essentially going to backdoor that whole thing by essentially saying that Daryl and those guys took money from the team. They took funds that were essentially paid not by themselves and would essentially make us playing ineligible players, and that we would end up not being in good standing with the league. So I heard about this. I was like, I'm not going to let some stupid crap like this happen. So I just told them all, you guys need to give the money back to the team, and you guys need to pay your own money. So the only reason that didn't become a bigger story and issue prior to the season, this is like a week before the season started, was because I caught wind of it and I, got it all sorted out. But yeah, there was definitely some bad blood with the Wolfpack guys not being very happy with the way Daryl and Ryan left, and it turned into a bit of a shit show. But luckily we were able to get out ahead of it. So, nothing ever came of it, but it was definitely something that was
yeah. And I mean,
kind of a behind the scenes, just so much shit that I was trying to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, when you're dealing with 2 crosstown rivals as well, and it just adds all that extra like spice to it, and then there's egos that get involved. And I know, like, at the same time, like you mentioned, you're talking about the Irish becoming involved, and that was kind of like, I remember in that time when I was kind of on the outside watching that all happen, I was like, this just isn't going to work. Like, I just can't see it working with 3 Calgary teams, and of course, eventually now we're down to 2, and it's still kind of tough because it looks like, Airdrie's kind of picking up a lot of guys, but it's kind of lasted. Like, you kind of saw like Airdrie and the Pack struggled and the Gators thrived. And then when the Gators left, both those teams were just not very good. And now we were seeing where the Pack are kind of on the rebuild and the Airdrie's kind of really rising. So that doesn't shock me that people would kind of try to be a little snaky with that and try to get some guys suspended. So Omari, any thoughts on that?
This is all history lesson for me, because I came to the Pack in 2018 after my 2017 season with the Colts. So from 2018 on is when I was more trying out different teams and everything to see around. But at this point, I don't really have anything to say much on that. Like, if anything, I'm more or less glad that they were able to work things out to keep the team around, because I only think now of like how they have been able to keep playing football, but I can only imagine, think back like, oh, you're done Colts, there's no team in Calgary, you got to go to Red Deer or Edmonton to keep playing football. So
yeah, and the thing too is like with our team, like when I decided to dissolve the team in 17, like my thought really was like a lot of guys were done playing. And if you really look at that team and you look back at the teams that the guys that went and played in Red Deer and a couple guys to the Wolfpack, there's literally only like, say 6, 7, 8 guys that ended up continuing to play from that team in the league. Like really everybody was done. We were kind of done in 16, but we just kind of felt like we had, like things didn't work out. We had a lot of injuries in 16 and we wanted to make another run in 17. So, but my thought was when I dissolved the team was I could walk away and let, like Don Nelson or somebody run the team again. But I just felt like with everybody leaving, like there's already enough teams. Like if this was a small town, obviously, yeah, let another guy run the team. There isn't another team in town. I just didn't want to see another team that couldn't win a game or was getting beat by 50 points a game. Like I didn't want, and I especially didn't want that to become the Gators, because we'd worked hard to do what we did in the time that I was helping run the team. But
and 17 was the year where you guys went up to Fort Mac and upset them in the finals, right?
Oh yeah, we went up there and they were sure that they were going to win that game. And yeah.
And to add that thing too, just on how things wrapped up too, like it's very rare that you see a team wrap up so cleanly, just with and this is now I'm based off what I heard, but I remember when I first came in, I was like, hey, like what's the AFL landscape like? Oh, Gators just wrapped up. What happened there? And from what I heard, it was where, team had, you guys were a winning record. I knew you were running it, and it was something where you said, okay, time to dissolve. Like you guys came off a winning season of Nationals too. Was it Nationals you guys won as well, 2017?
No, we lost 15 and 17. We've actually never hosted a national. We've played in 3 and been on the road team for all 3, and we lost by 1 point to GTA in 15 and 17. The same team lost by 1 point. We actually had a blocked field goal in 17 to lose that game.
Oh man.
Yeah. I was on the road, 1 point losses twice. That's crazy.
That's tough. Like for me, looking back in the league, because like I ended up winning one with Fort Mac, and that was great, and I had a great time that year. But like looking back on it, there's so many guys. Like for me, it's whatever. Like I really wanted to win one, but there's so many guys, kind of like how it was 2 years ago in Red Deer. Like when I played with guys and we won, I was happy to be there, and it was awesome. Like just seeing. Like you could just feel it in that crowd and the people there and the alumni, like how much it meant to the guys that finally get that monkey off your back and win one. And I didn't get to feel that with the guys on the Gators, because so many guys that played for so long and put so much work into it. That's the one thing looking back on it. I wish we could have won one, but we had a good run. I mean, I put our team up against any of the decades of teams in this league. I think we just were unfortunate. I feel like if we would have hosted one and played Canadian rules, something that we were used to all year, I think we would have won. I mean, it sounds great, like going there with a great offense and playing 4 downs, but it's different. Like you're not playing that all year. You're you don't know how to work the clock, and it's just a different game when you're playing 4 downs.
And for those that don't know, the Ontario League that we play in the national final, they play all the same rules, but with one exception. They have 4 downs, and so it's the same size field, it's the same Canadian rules, but they just add a down, which would be different because you're used to playing a certain way the whole time. And I know for like you mentioned, what's amazing about this league is when the Bucks won in 21. I mean, that was my 11th year on the Bucks, and we had some pretty big heartbreaks along the way, and winning it at home in front of that crowd. And you mentioned the alumni, like the first people that the first person I hugged wasn't even my wife. I was trying to find her. She was in the crowd. It was actually an alumni that hadn't played for like 7 years. And he was so emotional because of how much that the Bucks had meant to him in his life. And it wasn't even him winning. His name is Curtis Drager. First guy I hugged after the final horn went off. And I have that on video. I have it on video where he finds me and we embrace, and it's like a 30-second long hug, and it's one of the best memories of my life. And that is what is so amazing about this league. And so I totally feel you. And those 1-point losses you had, like, I remember, I think I was watching a live stream of it, and you were lining up for that field goal, and I'm like, what? They're like, you're really going to do this on the road? Like, no AFL team, I believe the 08 Wolfpack maybe won on the road, but I'm not even sure about that. I don't know if any AFL teams won on the road. It's hard to win on the road there. So yeah, that would definitely be heartbreaking. This one I want to get to. So this one for me, this is about the Bucks, and this is when you were president of the league. And this one, there's a lot to this. I remember being in the middle of this and almost like not wanting to hear what was going on because it was like incredibly stressful. And I'm sure it was for you as well. So let's kind of dive into the 2016 Bucks issue. You were president of the league, and the Bucks, I'll let you kind of tell the story how you found out, but the cliff notes for me, the Bucks had a player that possibly was getting paid or flights were being paid for. There was a issue with the Bucks ended up wanting to sue the league, and there was lawyers involved and Stampede or play-by-play people. And just talk about that story, because it's one that's, I want to hear the more inner details as well.
So I'll start with this. Matt Squires was the president of the league in 15 and 16, I believe. I don't know when his tenure started, but the season that this happened was the 16 season, when you guys actually had a great season. Brandon Lay's first year, and you guys had an awesome team. Ended up losing to Fort Mac in the AFL final, and Fort Mac, went on nationals. But it was that season. Squires was the president of the team of the league, and he was stepping down. I think he stepped down that off season, and all this started happening in the off season after the playoffs. I believe the timeline's a little iffy. You might know better. I can't remember if it actually started with a guy on your team sending stuff out. I don't know if the actual season was still going on or not. I believe it was after, maybe before nationals, but your season was over. A guy came forward, and I was, a team rep for the Gators, so I was kind of privy to all this. And Squires, would always kind of contact me and let me know what was going on, and I kind of helped him the best I could. But there was literally this long an essay of the player on the team saying about how he was compensated, and and I've seen this before. There's the guys, they talk. A lot of guys talk and say they're getting this and that just because they think they're better than the league and they feel they should be getting paid. But this came with receipts and email transfers and all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, well, this is kind of, this is not looking good for the Bucks. But this kept dragging on, where it didn't even get into the lawyers thing. This is in the off season. The Bucks are trying to, have meetings and try to get this resolved. And the AGM comes up, and Squires is stepping down. I was very adamant that I wanted to run for president to help the league, but I wanted this situation resolved before I became president. Of course, that didn't happen. I was kind of hesitant to run for president, but then I saw the guys that were stepping up to run for president, and I was like, well, I would rather see the league, be run in the direction that I think is best for the league. So I stepped up, became president. This whole situation kind of fell into my lap, and it ended up with the Bucks essentially saying, if you try to reprimand us, or if there's any punishments that we deem is more than fair, then we're gonna sue you. So I ended up having to get a lawyer. I only knew there's a lawyer in town, Greg Peterson. I believe he played for the Stampeders. He's like the play-by-play radio guy for the Stamps. He's a lawyer, and I know him because of the Greater Football Association. He was actually like the guy that runs it and helped fund like Shouldice Field, all that $1 million that it took to renovate that place and get the turf fields and now like the nice locker rooms. Like, he is huge for the football community here in Calgary. Yeah. And I called him, and I'm just like, listen, man, like, I don't know what to do. Like, I tried to call Football Alberta, like they've never dealt with anything like this. And he's like, well, like, this is my retainer fee. Like, I can, try to let them know, like, he's from a really big law firm, and I could try to scare them. it seems like it's probably a law firm that's like a smaller local Red Deer law firm. And I just wanted it to be done. I was like, let's try to, have him mediate this thing. And it just was going nowhere. And we had a meeting, and there was teams in the league that were like, how do we get this resolved? And they're like, oh, the Bucks need to be removed from the league, like a permanent removal. And I'm just like, let's look at this from a rational standpoint. Like, even if take football away, the Bucks have been a good team. You've had your years on and off, whatever. They're a good team. The Bucks do more for their community than any team in this league at the time, and I still probably think right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and you guys can't look at this. I believe it was the Stars. That was the first team. Like, if it was Troy or whoever was
the old St. Albert Stars. Yeah.
That was their first thing. Oh, well, let's just kick them out of the league because that's what's best for our team. And that's been an issue that I'd like to talk about too. Just, everybody looking out for themselves. But yeah, let's kick them out. And, really at the end of the day, that probably been the easiest thing for me because it just went on for months. And, a former player for you guys, Kenton Polzer, got involved, and, he's a great dude and was kind of becoming the mediator for the Bucks. And I had to talk with him, and it just turned into a whole thing. And I finally went to the lawyer and was like, listen, can you try to come up with something that makes sense? And he's like, well, why not let them play and just have them maybe have some recruiting violations where they can't recruit outside of Red Deer? And I was like, well, yeah, that actually makes sense. Hopefully that'll be something. Because of course you had to appease the guys in the league that were in the sense of like, we really don't care that they paid somebody. We just want to take advantage of this to where we can kind of cripple this team. So if we can't get them banned permanently, let's make it to where they're not going to have a competitive team, which, that following year, 17, you guys had some decent players, but you couldn't recruit outside of Red Deer. So it was very tough.
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah.
Kind of what ended up being agreed upon. I was still in the boat. Like Mark Fay, who was running the team, would call me and be like, listen, man, this guy is from Edmonton. He's played with us before. And I was just like, I wouldn't even go to the board. I would just be like, just let him play. Just don't make it a thing and say he's from Edmonton, because technically that was outside of the agreement. And I'm just like, listen, I'm not going to make this to where you guys can't field a football team. Like, obviously don't bring in a dude that's a CFL player from out east, but I'm not going to tell you can't bring a guy from Edmonton. So yeah, that just turned into a huge thing where it finally kind of got sorted out and lawyers were involved. And yeah, and then it even kind of turned into a thing with the lawyers. I don't even know so much on the Red Deer side, but Greg Pearson was just like, listen, I'm just going to send him letters and let him know, like, we're a huge law firm. And if he thinks like our lawyer was kind of just like big brother and the other lawyer saying like, you're not going to outlast our law firm. Like, this isn't going to end well for you guys sending letters. And I'm glad it got resolved, but yeah, it was a stressful time. It was just something that, shouldn't have happened. And I wish, what really killed me was, I was really looking forward to being president of the league, and it took, I don't even know. It was probably getting close up to the following season that I wasted an entire off season of dealing with that. And, made it pretty much impossible to get anything done when it came to league stuff when I was dealing with that stuff, which is unfortunate, but,
Yeah. And what's funny about that is I actually have the exact same story. So when you took over the AFL dealing with a team possibly getting kicked out of the league, and I took over the AFL as president because I was vice president, and then I had to step into the role of president. And I took over the role of president in the middle of the Cold Lake saga, where Cold Lake was getting kicked out of the league. And I can tell you, for that stress alone, I never want to be president of the league again, because it was just it was such a man, I was in my time, I was like, I was fielding calls from like players' wives trying to like beg me to not have Cold Lake kicked out of the year. And so I was going around trying to fight for Cold Lake for the same reasons you are. The whole league wanted these guys kicked out of the league. And I'm walking around saying, why are we the Cold Lake is the team? That's the kind of team the AFL needs. Like, they're big in their community. They're popular in their community. They're recruiting well. They have a good team. Like, that is but all these teams wanted to vote this team out. And in my opinion at the time, purely because Cold Lake was very good and they knew Cold Lake was going to continue to be good. And I had to, they literally were kicked out of the league. And then I begged the board to essentially, let's relook at this. Let's give them another chance to like basically do a proposal and get these guys back in the league. And finally, I was able to do that. But it blows my mind that like, why would you ever, like you said, the Bucks are a flagship team in this league that do so much for, it's not even close to just about football.
Yeah, no, I agree. And last year, there was I don't know how much you were involved in or knew, but obviously there was another issue with Cold Lake, and there was talk of them, and this was like in playoff time, like they're gonna get them removed from the league, and like I think Glenn and Travis, and I think even some guys from some other teams actually contacted me, and I had kind of heard what was going on, and technically, like, I still run the league social media, even though it's not like a real, I just do it for the heck of it. Like, I'm not really a board member, I guess, technically, but I started seeing the evidence that they had. And I just was like, this is the stuff that has bothered me since I've been part of the league. Like I said, it's really about what's best for everybody's team. It's never about what's best for the league. There's definitely some guys kind of mixed in there that really do just care about the league. But I saw the evidence and I was like so annoyed with it. I was out of town for work and I was in a hotel and I just said, you know what, somebody give me the code to get on this conference call. Because I really believe if I wouldn't have gotten on there, they were prepared to remove Cold Lake from the playoffs last year. That's
really? Wow.
That's how far it got. And I got on there and they were like, it was kind of like the opening stuff where everybody had a chance to talk. And, they were, and I had let whoever know, I'd let somebody know, like, hey, before it goes to anything, I want to have 5 minutes. I'm technically running the social media. I should at least have some say. I want to talk. So whoever was running the call kind of, was like, all right, well, Kurt has something to say. And I just told them, I said, listen, you guys have no evidence with this. I said, there's guys in this league and stuff that's happened with way more evidence where nothing ever came of it. This was all hearsay. This was just guys chirping and talking. And I even told Vince on the call, I said, Vince, one of the guys that was involved in this IDing the kicker, I said, Vince, last year playing with you guys with the Bucks, this guy has a big mouth. He thinks he's, some of these guys, like I said, think they're bigger than the league. So instead of just being like humble and saying, I'm here, I'm trying to get film and go play in Europe, go play in the CFL, whatever it is, they think that they're bigger than the league and they have to say, well, I'm getting paid and this and that. Because I know that happened for a fact around the league. It happened with our team. Guys that we brought in that would go and tell guys, and I know for a fact they're not getting paid. Like, paying these guys to play football. So
the fake flex.
They would try to flex on guys. And I told them, I said, I know for a fact Dean told me the same kind of stuff last year when he would come to practice, when he'd have to drive from Edmonton. I said, Vince, did you pay him? No. I said, well, this is the same thing. So if I just come and say, well, I heard him say that, and, and then I went off, and just told him, stood on my soapbox for a few minutes and told him that, they're just trying to run a kangaroo court. And this is just ridiculous that they're even having this. And then, they all talked and they had me get off and they voted and they let him obviously stay in the league. But there was teams that were pretty adamant where it was like, yeah, this makes it easier for us. We might be able to win this thing. Let's kick them out of the playoffs. Yeah,
and I've seen that, and I know that to be true. And it's I'm glad that you were able to come on that call and have kind of be a voice of reason, because it can kind of be a bit of an echo chamber in that boardroom. And when you got certain people that push for stuff, it can be very aggressive a lot in a lot of times. So I'm glad they were willing to listen to you. And obviously I'm glad Cold Lake, nothing came of it, because you're right. I was talking to Travis Levitsky when that was going on, and he was sending me all the evidence that apparently was against them. And I'm like, is this actually real right now? Like, why this is, and like, look, Travis, I've learned that I can never fully trust what he's saying. Like, maybe but it was so clear at this time that he was telling the truth. And Travis and I have had an on and off relationship, but I've really grown to kind of respect some parts of him. I wish he wouldn't talk about people's wives and mothers so much. Like, that would be my one criticism, Travis, if you're listening. would we have you on? Like, there's a lot of wife and mother talk, which I think is offline, but overall, he's good doing it. I'm glad that they were able to figure that out. And I hope we get away from that from the league. Like, I was the same as you, Kurt. I when I was president, I wanted so badly to like do things for the league to make it better. I wanted to I want to talk to you about this because you mentioned you might have a solution. One of my big things was simple. It was, can we get a sponsor for a trophy? Like, and I had a sponsorship lined up from Supplement King, and we were literally, it was $1,000 sponsorship. This is when I was president. $1,000 sponsorship from Supplement King to buy us a trophy for $1,000. So imagine we can get a really nice trophy for $1,000, and we were going to call it the King Cup. And then of course, I didn't, I finished that through because I ended up not being president like 2 days later after I got that sponsorship for a number of reasons. But I just I want to hear your idea on the trophy because I know you said you have something, but I just wish that we could get people involved that wanted to advance the league.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there is, I think the league is moving in the direction where it just by guys getting old and aging out and just like getting to where it's just beyond just like not playing football. Some of these guys are so old to where it's like, they got to worry about surviving to rather than worrying about the league. And I really do appreciate those guys, but there's definitely guys in the league for a long time that I was in it where it was like, you guys just want this to be an old boys club. You don't like the idea of it actually kind of turning into something where it's bigger than what it was when they first started the league. And there's definitely guys that feel that way. I think there's way more youth coming into the league and guys with ideas and guys willing to step up and I feel like there's certain guys in the league that are old school, like Glenn, from the Jets. I think he's the kind of guy that you want around because he's been around a long time, but he's still open to kind of progress in the league. And I know he's had his, issues with the league and stuff that he's done, but I know Glenn well. And you know what, at the end of the day, I still believe Glenn cares more about this league than most people. So
yeah, we're all human. We all do dumb things at one point or another. And I think I've always enjoyed Glenn, and you're right. His intentions are always pure, and he's a great ambassador for the league, I think. Yeah.
And as far as the trophy goes, I just feel like with the trophy's not big. Like if you look at like the NFC's trophy and like the CMFL, the trophy is
huge.
Those are 4 times the size.
Yeah.
I feel like to appease the old school and the tradition of the league, because I do appreciate it. And like even the NFC, like that league goes back like to like the 60s or something like that. Like and AFL goes back into the 80s, which I mean that's impressive. Like football's huge in Florida. You'll be lucky for a league to stick around and not merge with another league or change names and this and that. You'll be lucky if a league sticks around for 5 years. So The fact that a league has stuck around that long, I feel like the easiest way to do it to make everybody happy is that you make that trophy kind of the centerpiece, and you build columns around it, build a cup above it, and maybe refinish the trophy and redo the nameplate, stuff like that. I think that's the way that people are going to agree. I think if you just try to say, let's chuck the old trophy, there's still people that are hanging on to the old school AFL stuff where I think you'll get a lot of, pushback. But I think the easiest way to make everybody happy is build around the old trophy. And realistically, you put a couple columns like the CMFL trophy and a cup above it with that inside of it. It's not like it's going to be some giant, like overbearing trophy because the AFL trophy itself is tiny. So,
Yeah, I want some bulk in that trophy when you lift it up. You know what I mean? But I like that. Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. So I think that's the best way to go. And I do want to point on Travis. I do agree some of the shit he says. Even when I played with him with the Monarchs, like I would have to kind of be like, dude, shut up. Like, But he is one of those guys. If he's going against you, usually, he's pretty good. Even guys he's going against, he's chippy, but he means well. But if he's a teammate of yours, he'll do whatever. I've seen him, guys that don't have money, we go out after the game and go to dinner. He'll buy everybody dinner. Like he's just that kind of guy. Like he actually is a good dude. He just says a lot of dumb shit, and I've gotten on him about it before, but again.
Yeah, I mean, he donated. He did that hockey fight thing and donated his money to I think a kid sport. So yeah. And then he saved some people from a fire. So he's a pretty cool dude, actually, pretty nuanced. And I think it's that's kind of my point of this podcast, Kurt, is and Omari and I have talked about this a lot. Is just it's cool to get to know guys outside of the football field. Like I've been really enjoying listening to people's stories and interests, and it's been cool. You know, you feel like a deeper connection to people in the league, which I think is important. Like we're obviously rivals and we go against each other, but at the end of the day, like we're all humans with making the same sacrifices and with the same goals in mind. So it's kind of cool and unique.
Yeah, and like we like earlier talking about like how much it hurt to lose 2 national championships the way we did. If I could say, okay, well, I'll just go and if say I played for another team and we won 3 or whatever, at the end of the day, like I'll always remember that stuff, and it was always cool, and you'll remember what it felt like, winning the trophy and all that stuff. But realistically, like all the people that I've met, like to be honest, if I would have met all the people I played football with, I probably would be back in Florida. I don't know if I would have lasted here, not knowing anybody, not playing sports in the cold ass weather in freaking Canada. I probably have been back home after a year. But I have lifelong friends through this league, and that's why I want to keep contributing as much as I can, because I just from the little bit that it's helped me, that's helped thousands of guys that came through this league. So
for sure. Yeah. That leads me to my next question. What about guys like yourself who aren't involved with a team, becoming board members and actually having the ability to govern the league or doing what's best for the league, and instead of obviously a bunch of guys who are routinely just voting for their respective team's best interest. So like what do you think about that? How do we get people that are not associated with the team to want to step up and sacrifice their time and be a part? Because I think that's a great answer. I think it's a great answer. The question then becomes, how do we get guys to do that? Guys like yourself.
I think if it becomes a rule or a bylaw that gets passed that every team has their representative, which makes up the board right now. And, and then you have your named president, your vice president and treasurer. And then, every team has their representative. I think if you keep every team as a representative, that's kind of like the middleman from the actual board members to the rest of the league. They say their piece, they're every team is heard, but there should be an acting body that is made up, obviously an odd number for voting purposes, a president, vice president, and say treasurer or whatever. Those people should have the right to vote and make decisions for the league, because, and you are president and you understand this, it's just a title.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, my word means nothing more than a guy that literally falls asleep on a conference call, wakes up, and I think it was Belrose said something kind of similar, where a guy just during a call was like, "Oh, whatever Jim Lightfoot said, I'll vote for that." Mm-hmm. Those kind of guys have the same vote that I do as the president, putting in all the work and actually trying to make change in the league. Mm-hmm. I think the league needs to really look at it and say, hey, we need to attract some guys that actually are going to just, it might not be what's best for our team because we screwed up and we're trying to, backpedal and try to talk to teams and, get our way out of something that we did. It should be every team kind of comes to a meeting, says their piece, and that acting board makes votes based on what's best for the league. And the only way you're going to get that is people that are, not affiliated. Somebody like me, like obviously I was with the league, but I played on multiple teams. I'm friends with guys all around the league. I'm not going to be, swayed by somebody calling me and trying to, plead their case. But I think if that became the rule, I think more people like me would be willing to step up. I do. I think guys like Belrose, and for what everybody cares, you get so many stories about belly rolls, about how people don't like him. He cares as much about this league as anybody. So, and I do believe that he would be, unbiased towards, things with the league. So it's guys like that, if they actually had power to make change.
Yeah.
I think they'd be willing to do it. Until then, and like I said, I feel like the league is going that way. I feel like the more years that go on, I feel like guys that are running teams are more open to that and understand that it's better to be worried about playing football and doing things the right way. And if things come up that something happens, let the people that are just in charge of that vote on it. Like, don't, you guys got games to play. You got other stuff to be worried about, not, did this guy get compensated, or, was this a malicious hit and tried to injure somebody? Like, it should be all, it should be a guideline of certain things that, the board should vote on. And, everybody agrees the guys that they voted for to be president, vice president, treasurer are going to make the best decision for the league. So.
Well, that's exactly it. Like that's exactly it. Like trust the guys that you're voting for. And so, when I actually tried to do that. So when I became president, because I love Ryan Belrose and him, and I actually hated him for my first couple of years because he was really hard on me, but I've grown to really love him. I've talked to him so much like when I was president, I called him so much because I leaned on him, because he was so smart and experienced. And I was like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, I'm struggling right now, man. Like, here's the situation. Walk me through this. And he said, look, you're not going to want to do this job if you don't have a vote. And I didn't even realize at the time the president didn't have a vote. So as president, my job is to just make sure that the meeting is attended by people. So I don't actually get a vote on anything. And I said, well, we have to change that. And we actually did. I got the board to pass a bylaw that allowed the president, the vice president, the secretary, and the treasurer to have votes, so we could actually be a part of it. And then that lasted, I was about president for about 5 months. And then when the new regime took over, they got rid of that again. I don't really know why, but they're like, no, we don't want that. And so they went back to the current system where the only people that get votes are the teams. But like you said, when you have that as a problem, when you have it just as the teams, like, they're going to vote for what they believe is correct. Like, obviously I've known you for a long time, and I know that you're not somebody that is swayed by people. You look at the situation and to deal with that. And so, and I hope that people are listening. I hope that that's something that we can do as a league, because I think that if we could get people that aren't affiliated with teams that could actually come in here, but they would have to, they have to feel like Ryan's talked about that too. They got to feel like they can be involved. Omari, what do you think about any of that?
I've always liked the idea of having players who aren't, mostly players who haven't played for a while, but as well, like, history people who come in, because it's a great way just to take it out of people who are active in the league, but as well keep the community together. And I think I mentioned before where it'd be cool to have like a AFL booster club where, the guys who are on the booster side of things or alumni side of things can help things run. And, teams with such a strong alumni, their foundation and backing is so much more, like, it's just worth more in weight. So it'd be something great to work towards. And I feel like there has to be something that's worth it for those guys who do commit to it. Because again, it's time that people take away from family and work, but I'm sure we can work out a way to where there's a form of giving it back to their efforts and time they put in.
Well, and like, kind of speaking on the booster, like, whatever happened with the Hall of Fame, like, that was something, and even the All-Star game, like, me and Belrose literally sat down prior to them coming to the Gators. Like, we sat down as rivals and we're like, let's just do it. Let's figure out a way to make this happen. And we just, like, sat down at a pub one night and put together an all-star game. And when it started, it was actually really cool. And then it just kind of got watered down and diluted and, just kind of fizzled out. But, like, the Hall of Fame, I know guys in the Hall of Fame, and there's certain guys that were like, oh yeah, that's cool, I appreciate it. There were guys that meant a lot to them, because there was a couple inductions that we did in the playoffs, I believe, for the Gators. We did a couple games in Calgary because there was a lot of Calgary-based guys that were inducted. And at one of the half times or something at one of our playoff games, like, we, had them come out on the field, announce them. There were guys that were emotional, man. It meant a lot to these guys that put a lot of years in. Like, stuff like that needs to come back. The All-Star game wasn't perfect, but if it can be done right, that's something that I think a lot of guys, appreciate. Obviously, with the national game, it makes things kind of difficult because obviously a lot of guys on the national team are probably voted all-star. You got to decide when that game gets played because those guys are getting ready for a national championship. So there's ways to do it, and there's things that can be done in the league. Just got to have the right guys that are willing to put the work in and do it.
You know what? The Hall of Fame was really cool. I remember that coming out. And of course that would mean a lot to people because, when you get inducted into the AFL Hall of Fame, what you're doing is people are recognizing the sacrifices that you've made, and it becomes worth it. And so, yeah, I know, for myself, like if that ever comes back, that would mean a lot to me if I was, able to be voted into something like that. I think that's really cool. And, I remember we used to have a ring sponsor for that. They'd get a ring for it. It was really cool. And the All-Star game, man, like those All-Star games that we had in like 2013, 2014, they were so fun. Like we did big country versus big city. So it would be like the Calgary teams would all be on one team, and then the rest of the league, the Red Deers, the Fort Macs, would be on another team. And we would show up, we would wear our dark jerseys, you guys would wear your white jerseys. And it was a ton of fun. Like you got to play football with people. We honestly, for 2 or 3 years, we had really good attendance. And then, and I remember, I think it was your guys' year. Maybe it was 2013. I think the Gators won the championship, maybe. And they, and you guys just didn't play in the All-Star game. Your guys I think you actually had like 2 guys that actually still showed up.
13, we actually did. In 13 was Calgary versus the league. That was the first All-Star game. Was I think that was my first or second year in the league. Was when we out. That was when we played in Red Deer versus it was the Wolfpack and Gators versus the rest of the league. And that was actually, we were going to play in nationals. We played that game and played national championship 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, we played that in Lacombe. That's right.
That would have been 2015 when we were going to GTA and
right.
And guys, that was in Edmonton. Because I remember I showed up and, I think I was like the commentator up in the PA guy up in the booth. But
yeah, I had to play quarterback that game. No quarterback showed up for that game, so I ended up playing quarterback. It was ridiculous.
That was your boy, the guy from the Bucks that went and played in the CFL, Tanner Green. That was kind of his
Tanner Green
party. Yeah. Like he killed it that game.
Yeah,
going on to play college ball and then going and playing in the CFL. Really, and like. When that kid first got in the league, he was like, like a baby deer running around. Like he really what he became is amazing.
Well, that's so funny. You say it. I'm pretty sure he was pretty new to football. He totally was a baby deer. Like he didn't really have a huge understanding. He was just so physically gifted. Yeah. And then he went off to played 1 year with the Bucks, and he was clearly had amazing talent. And then he went off to Concordia, and then he got drafted, I believe, by the Elks, and he's still playing for the Elks. And he was starting fullback. He caught a touchdown last year. He's doing some great things.
Yeah.
I want to talk. We got about 15 or so minutes. We're going to have you on again, Kurt, because there's a lot of stuff that we want to get into. So we'll have a part 2 of Kurt coming up as well. But I'm going to ask one question here that I want you to talk about, and then I'll just kind of open the floor, and you can be free to talk about what you want, or we'll see if Omari's got something for you. So in 2018, and I remember this year, so the 2018 year, both Fort Mac and the Bucks were very good. We played in the regular season, and it was a close game, back and forth. The whole Bucks were actually up 14-0 to start that game. It was in Red Deer, and Fort Mac came back, and then Brandon Lay broke his rib. And this was in the final game of the regular season. The winner of this game was going to host playoffs. And so it was I believe it was a tie game, or maybe somebody was up by a little bit, but Brandon Lay had a guy tackle him, fall on his back, broke his ribs, and it was out for the year. And you guys ended up winning that game. Josh Blanchard came into quarterback, but you guys ended up winning that game. And then, of course, we came up to Fort Mac in the finals with our backup quarterback, and we lost like 60-0. But Jesse Maddox, who ran the team at the time, and I remember this because when we pulled up to the game, I was like, what is going on with like I saw you call him plays. So Jesse Maddox fired the OC going into the playoffs. So talk about that a little bit, because I want to know what happened. I still don't know what happened there.
Yeah, going into that Bucks game, like we had, like the one thing obviously playing, and you've played on some high level teams with the Bucks. When you have high level guys that played at a high level, obviously in different leagues, you have guys that know what they're doing. They know football to put in a game plan. Like when we practice, things get done. It's not trying to teach guys how to play. It's just, getting the fine tunes of things. We would go into games, and I do want to kind of start by the offensive coordinator for the Monarchs. He was an awesome dude. Kareem he knows football too. His issue that I feel that what kind of just did him in was he kind of came into the season with a playbook, not knowing what he had as players, which is, you can't do that. Like, just being very blunt, like you have to be willing to, kind of build your playbook around the guys you have. You can't come in and say, hey, I know we have a bunch of stud running backs that are going to run downhill, but we're just going to run spread the entire game. It's just, you can't do that. So we came into a couple games late in the year where we had a game plan, and for whatever reason, play calling wise, we just got away from the game plan. It really made no sense. Guys were getting very frustrated on the sidelines, and we went into that Red Deer game that you guys hosted, and it was an awesome game. Like, just obviously you don't want to be on the losing end of that, but the atmosphere there, the way it was back and forth and the way it went, like, that was one of the better games I've ever played in the league. And we just, at the end of the game, there were some guys that were really upset. I wasn't happy, but obviously, like, I understand, like, you can't just, like, implode. Like, I've been there before, and cooler heads got to prevail. A lot of guys came to Jesse, and I just got a call and was like, hey, do you think you can call plays for Karsten, who was our quarterback at the time? And I'm like, yeah, like, what's going on? He's like, well, I think I'm going to be getting rid of the OC. And I was like, oh, it's a bold move here. We've got like 2 weeks before the playoffs. And, at the time we knew Brandon was hurt, but we didn't know how hurt he was. It was kind of up in the air whether he'd be playing the rest of the season. And he just kind of, I told Karsten, Karsten's another amazing guy, awesome dude, just family guy, came up from the States, actually had his church actually put money, they fundraised money to get him up here for the summer to play. And like, he played big ball. Like, he played at Coastal Carolina. They weren't what they were at the time. Like, I was when that program first started, but Coastal Carolina now, like, you turn on ESPN, TSN on a Thursday night, they're playing on TV. Like, they're a big time college football program. He came up, like, his church fundraised, got him up here. He was a great kid. And I just told him, I said, dude, we've got like 2 weeks, and like, Jesse wants us to kind of change the playbook a bit to kind of help you. And like, it's not going to work, with me not being there. So I actually, helped him come down to Calgary, got him a bus ticket, and was like, just come down, and there's guys in Calgary. We'll just go playbook and we'll figure it out. So we kind of worked some things out, and we got back up there, and I just told Jesse, I'm like, listen, like, I think we've got some things figured out, but like, I'm not like to call the plays in and get this figured out is not going to be easy. Like, I've never done anything like this before. Like, you don't just get rid of an OC going into the playoffs. And so we go into the next game, and I will say this was one I was a little iffy about because, it is still kind of fresh, but whatever. It is what it is. He comes in and he's like, hands me Carson's helmet, and I'm like, what am I looking at? And he like shows me his helmet, and he's got him not mic'd up, but he's got like a QB speaker in his helmet. And I'm like, okay. He's like, just call the plays and like hold this walkie-talkie and you call in the plays. And at the time I was like, all right, that's cool. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, I don't know if this is allowed, because I know in certain leagues the other team has to have that capability. Like, it is allowed, but the other team has to have their quarterback wired up too. So I was like, whatever. Like, I was like, whatever. This isn't my team. Like, at the end of the day, like, I'm just gonna roll with it. So I essentially called plays for him in his helmet, and like had to help him. Like, there were times like he's going to the line because it was pretty fresh. Like, there were plays that was from the Gators that we put in that helped him a lot, but we didn't get to rep it much. Like, I was working in Fort Mac, but very rarely I had a job up there that I was doing, but I was in and out. So, I'm like at the line, like, hey, don't forget, like, this guy's got an out, And we get into nationals. The microphone breaks, or the speaker breaks to where I can't turn off the speaker. And I didn't know that for a while, and he's not telling me this. So I'm like yelling when he messes up, or like yelling when I'm watching it. Cause like when I know football and I've been doing it a long time, like I know I'm reading the coverage and I know what's open, and I'm just like, hit the hook. And like, he comes over to me finally and he's like, hey man, like, I appreciate you trying to help me, but you're yelling in my ear while I'm trying to throw, and like it doesn't work. And I'm just like, what? And I realized, I'm like, all right, I got to try to figure out a way where I can like mute it or keep it close to me where I keep it quiet, and then I can talk to him and call the plays. Because like for a while it was almost like I was telling him where to throw, but I didn't know that he could hear me. So yeah, it was a little bit of a probably
that's crazy.
Not the rules. I don't know if there's actual rules within the league. I'm sure it would be frowned upon, but
there's not. Unfortunately, they might make them now that they listen to this, but currently they don't have those rules.
Yeah. If I would have known, it's funny because like a couple times, like he was, their coverage were running like a smash, and he's like he's forcing the corner, and the hook is wide open, and I'm like, throw the hook, and he's throwing it into double coverage. I'm just like, yeah, it was fun. Like once he came over to me and was like, telling me, he's like, I appreciate you trying to help me where to throw, but like I'm literally in the middle of throwing and you're yelling in my ear. I'm just like, well, I'm not doing that on purpose. The freaking microphones, I guess, is broken. So
yeah, it's just a natural reaction.
Yeah, we did a national championship off that. Funny enough, we beat GTA, who beat me twice by 1 point. We beat them by 1 point off of a missed field goal. So it was nice to walk in that handshake line and see the look on their faces, because I had shown them that look 2 times before. So
yeah, you didn't feel bad at all. Definitely not.
Big line, Cuthbertson actually stopped me and was like, he's like, I know what it feels like now, and like, gave me a hug. He's a good dude too. But yeah,
he's a good dude. Yeah. Omar, you got anything for Kurt?
Yeah, one I got is, Kurt, I know you've been around multiple leagues and everything, and I know this is a hot topic in our league in regards to player compensation. And so now, with your time playing and like taking a step back, do you feel like, is there a point our league could get to a place where compensation could be a conversation, or at least be part of the league legally?
I think it could be. In some ways, I kind of like, I'm back and forth with this sometimes. Sometimes I kind of just feel like the league could be better if it was handled the right way. I think, and I kind of mentioned this in the chat, I think the way that it would have to happen, if it was ever going to happen, it's not like some donor's going to come into the league or to every team and just throw a bunch of money. But I think there's enough to where you just take you can't go off of like the German foot. You can't go off of like GFL 1 or anything like that, because they've got big money behind them. And, there's a lot of money in those teams. I think you got to look at the lower level Euro teams and what they're able to do, where they get enough sponsorship, or the owner or the team kind of fundraises enough to where usually it works out where they'll get you out there for travel. Sometimes the player has to get their own travel, but what it could look like is get them their travel taken care of to get to the city that they're going to be playing in. Maybe a cell phone and transportation. So whether that's help them with their cell phone bill per month while they're here, or and maybe either make sure they have transportation, or let them borrow a car while they're here. And that doesn't just mean you show up and they give you this stuff and say, okay, these are the practices and this is where the games are. We'll see you then. Those guys go there. A lot of times there's feeder programs for those teams. So youth football is getting bigger to where they kind of have a team under them, and then they feed them into the Euro teams, because obviously in Europe football isn't as big, and it's still catching on. So they have a feeder program. Those players usually coach those feeder programs. They do stuff in the community. If there's fundraising, or if there's any type of, like with the Bucks do the blood drives and stuff like that, those guys are there every time. Like that's a stipulation that you have to be involved with the community and the outreach that we do. And I think that in the end, some guys might be a little butthurt over that, but if you and another thing is you cap it at X amount of, I think in EuroLeague, I think you're allowed 3 imports. So you cap it at 3, and you say, these are the guys. And I don't know how guys over here would take it. Over there, those guys that aren't getting compensated, they don't care. They're happy to have those guys that are going to make their team better, that are going to make them better, because they're coaching those guys and showing them, how to play football. And I don't know how that would be taken here, because, egos are a little bit bigger when it comes to football in Canada than it is probably in parts of Europe. But I think that's the way it could work. And, like I said, you don't have to pay and promise a bunch of stuff. You just say, hey, we'll get you out here. We'll help you, with transportation getting around. Your responsibility is anything we we do in the community, fundraising, all that you have to be involved in. And, you know, you're going to coach, and there might not be feeder programs for these teams, but you say, you know what, I guarantee you every team in this league has a guy that coaches minor sports in minor football in their city. You get them involved and say, hey, you know, part of the responsibility of kind of giving back to the community while you're here, you're going to coach the youth league in our city. I guarantee that you'd be able to find somebody on every team that could make that happen. And I think that's the realistic way that it can happen. And I think that's a pretty easy way. Honestly, like, I don't think that that's something crazy, like, you know, helping some, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but obviously kind of helping them with where they live. Listen, technically it's against the rules. If I'm the owner of a team or the president of a team and I have a guy staying with me, I guess, is that compensation? Like, you don't have to pay the guy's rent, but you can say, hey, we have a place that you can stay while you're here. And, you know, you don't have to pay rent, but you're not going to get some lavish apartment. You're probably going to be staying in a basement suite or something like that of one of the guys on the team's place. So I think that's the way that it would have to be done if it could be done. And I don't think that that's that hard. There is the idea of, you have to worry about, are they going to cap it at 3, or are they going to give those special things to more than 3 guys and then tell them to keep their mouth shut? You know, those are things you got to work out, but I guarantee you there's teams in the Euro League that are doing that. They probably figure out ways. It's not like those teams over there are perfect, but yeah, I think realistically that's the way it would have to be done. And I think it's a realistic way. I mean, there's certain teams that don't want it because they don't want to, you know, take the time to make that work. You know, some teams that vote against anything like that are, again, some of those teams that, you know, they are happy with being a mediocre team or a middling team and don't want to put the extra effort in. So I don't know. That's my thought on it. I think that's the way it would have to happen.
Yeah. And to feed off that now is just with like money in the league and everything. Cause you mentioned, I know with the Euro leagues, cause it's a growing sport there and with what they have. Are there things that you feel like the AFL or just other teams in the AFL could do to bump up money coming into the league outside of players paying their fees?
I do think so. There's got to be more growth. So I do think, you know, I remember, I feel like maybe it was on an episode you guys were talking about streaming games and stuff like that. Like, the Gators have been, it's become so simple now. Like, I don't understand why every team isn't live streaming the games. Cause like, I go to Airdrie games. If the Bucks are in town, like, I try to go to a Bucks and Airdrie or Wolfpack game, cause I know a lot of guys on the Bucks. I try to, when the Jets are in town, I know a lot of those guys. The Gators were streaming games we streamed our first game, I think, was the AFL Championship in 2013. Like, we've been streaming games for a long time. I think if you could grow that base, there's definitely monetization that could be done through the YouTube and possibly some sponsors for stream games to just even have their logo or whatever on the screen. And I think that's big, man. Like, you could easily, I know national championship, some of those stream games, those were definitely getting like, you know, not like thousands, but probably 1,000, 2,000 people watching those games, like the national championship. You know, I you know, there's room to grow there. There's definitely ways. You got to listen to some of the young guys in the league, because even some of the things that we were able to do with the Gators, I listened to the young guys. Like, everybody's like, oh, you're wasting money on uniforms and, you know, you're doing this and that. And I'm just like, we're recruiting some of these guys coming out of junior and CIS and making our team better, because they look at our team who has nice helmets and equipment and putting the effort in on social media. And then you got a team, you know, no offense, like the Wolfpack, but they're just old school. They want to keep the same helmet. They want to keep everything the same, and just young guys are gravitated more towards us. And Daryl actually used to tell me, he's like, and when he played for the Gators, he's like, I've never understood how you guys we would go out there, I would throw for 1,000,000 yards and all these touchdowns, and you guys would go and get a receiver that played in the CIS. And I'm just like, because we marketed it better and I recruited hard. Like, I knew what guys wanted to hear, what, you know, guys were going to actually, like, you know, relate to. And, you know, that's one thing I look at is like, you got to look at the youth in the league and take the ideas that they have and sit down and get these guys involved. And, there's going to be good ideas that come out of it. Like, that's kind of the first thing that comes off the top of my head, like possible monetization within the video stuff, within, YouTube, and possible sponsorships and stuff like that for games. But again, it becomes is everybody's got to be on board is, not to pick on them, but like the team way up north, the new team, the Cowboys, are they going to stream all their games? Are they going to fall in line with the idea of moving the league forward? And I'm just pointing them out as a team. I don't know them, but those are the things where it only works if everybody kind of buys in, and it kind of goes back to, some of the old school guys being willing to adapt with the league and not be willing to just be, quote unquote beer league or whatever. So.
I think sorry, I was on mute there. I think there's ways to look at everything, and I really like hearing that, and I hope people like hearing that and can kind of come up with ideas and bounce off of that, because I don't know, I think there's a lot of interesting things that the league could at least look into. Omari, what do you think?
It's definitely something where I've always liked the streaming idea, because you can at least then stream it to Facebook, YouTube, and everything, and then allowing, if you get the right platforms, you can allow for sponsorships there. Because I think I was talking to Teej about this just with the podcast here, and I know it's something now where eventually we might get approached with either hotels or like football equipment people where they know this is a very dedicated podcast, but I'm like, the league is so vast on that side, so it is something too that it'll definitely ramp up on what we can do. But I guess us young cats got some ideas that are definitely up and coming and everything. And one last question I got for you here, Kurt, is when things wrapped up with the Gators and the dissolution of the team and everything, from what I heard, it was quite a clean process where, you guys wrapped up. It was something where you're able to sell the uniforms and have it be a completely clean process. I only heard from hearsay, but would you be able to comment on how that process went and how clean it was for you and your end?
Well, it was hard. Like after we played in the national game, I had to look, and we took a little bit, and I still talked with all the guys, and everybody kind of said they were done. There was a handful of guys, and I will say, like, Don Nelson was willing to take over the team. Like, he was willing to take the team on. And my thought process, like, I'm good friends with Donnie. And I do feel, I want to shout Donnie out on the podcast, because I don't feel like he gets the credit that he deserves within the league. The guy's played in the league forever, and he's the best person. Like, he's the kind of person that you could need something. I could call him right now and tell him, whatever, something's wrong in my house. He will be over here within 5 minutes. But it kind of, that part of it, that's kind of a downfall for him too. He's too nice. When I came in 2012 or 13, he was in personal debt with the team because guys, he'd say, hey, you need to pay your fees. And guys would come and, they make their excuses and this and that. And Donnie didn't want to see the Gators fall apart. So he would literally put his own money into the team. And like, I came and I was like, I'm the opposite. Like, I understand, like, I'm friends with a lot of guys, but I can't be everybody's friend during the season. Like, I got to be the guy, the drill sergeant that says, I don't give a shit. That's not my problem. Work out a payment plan. The bills have to get paid with the team. And, when Donnie said that he was willing to take things over, I looked at it as a friend of Donnie and was like, I don't want you to get back into the same old BS with guys not wanting to pay and not wanting to do their fair share with the team, and it become your problem. And, like, some guys might not like that and might, be pissed at me about that. But that was kind of my thought on it. If Donnie wanted to keep playing, he could. And he's played in Red Deer. And look, he's, again, guy lives in Calgary. He goes to every blood drive. He's at every practice. The guy, is an awesome teammate. And he's still been able to play football. But I feel like he's not dealing with the stresses of trying to run a team. And at the same time, like I said earlier, with everybody leaving, I didn't want the Gators to turn into another team that couldn't win a game. And there was enough teams in the league that were that way. And I said, you know what, this might help Airdrie and Calgary, and maybe they'll be able to, pick up some players, which they didn't really pick up a ton from us, but guys that were looking to play football in the Calgary area, that was their options. And, I think, like I said, Airdrie has finally kind of got their footing. Anton's running a really good program there, and the Wolfpack have won an AFL championship since then. And, I just, that was kind of my thought process. And then my thought when I got rid of the team, there's been teams in this league that have folded before. They owed a bunch of money to this team and that team, and they owed a bunch for whatever reason. And I said that when we folded, I said, I'm going to make sure that we don't owe anybody any money, like Skyline Sports, which is a big thing here in Calgary. Like they sell all football equipment. There's been teams in the league that owed them thousands of dollars. We never owed them a dime, paid everything off, clean break. I was actually owed some personal money from, helping guys out when we flew for the national championship. It is tough. Like, you got to come up with guys that are struggling with money. Like, you got to come up with $300 or $400 plus, all your food and everything while you're there. And, some guys couldn't do that. And I said, well, listen, I'll lend you money, but I need to be paid back. This was out of my own pocket, not out of the Gators. And some guys, when the team folded, just decided that it wasn't their responsibility anymore to pay, which, was kind of bullshit. It kind of pissed me off because, I did it as a friend, not as the guy with the league. I wasn't going to leave guys behind and miss out a chance to go to Toronto and play in the national championship game. And, I ended up, we got rid of some like shoulder pads. The team we had accumulated, like I was good about getting helmets, shoulder pads. Like we had all kinds of stuff, and uniforms we got rid of, and we're able to pay the debts off. A couple guys still owed me money that tried to play in the league. And when the team folded, I asked the league, I said, listen, this is a list of guys that owe money to me personally, but it should be for the team. If those guys want to play for another team, they should have to pay. So a couple guys, I got some angry phone calls about of guys pissed off that I was trying to hold them accountable for the money that they owed. And I'm just like, man, it was literally my money. Like, it was me trying to be nice to you. And I'm glad the league held up on it, and I did get money back from a couple guys that I lent money to. And, it was a clean break. It was, at the end of the day, it sucked to see the Gators go, but, I don't think the league, the city couldn't keep having 3 teams. And if all these guys were done playing, the Calgary area doesn't need 3 teams that weren't good. And at the time, those 2 teams weren't good, and Calgary, or the Gators, wouldn't have been good either that year. So, there's some guys that probably don't feel that way, are probably upset that the team's gone. But, at the end of the day, they weren't the one putting in the hours that I was to make the team run the way it did. So, like, I respect guys and their opinions on it, but at the end of the day, it's, it was a decision that was made, and I think in the long run it was for the best. So
yeah, bring back the Gators. Hashtag bring back the Gators.
And been a couple of people that have talked about that, but I don't think it'll ever happen.
The one nice thing now with you, with the run you guys had, is like, you guys came, you guys dominated, you guys played, you guys have a winning record, and that was it. You don't want to damage that. Like that's a moment in time where you guys ran what you ran, and you guys had a lot of winning records there. So why would you want to come back and, not say tarnish, but
yeah. Well, and I'm gonna pat myself on the back a little bit, but the stretch that we had in the league, we made the league grow pretty big, because if teams didn't adapt to what we were doing, we would have just destroyed the league. Like, when we went to Montreal in 2013 and lost in the national championship to the Transit, I looked at Dave Spence, and he's another guy, he might have rubbed people the wrong way, but I got to know Dave, and he was an awesome dude. And it sucks, like, he passed away. I think it was the year after our national championship. He came out to a practice or before a game in 2018, and you could tell he was not in good health. And it was sad, because he's young and he was a good guy, and he was big for the football community wherever he went. And seeing what he put together in Montreal, I knew, like, okay, we've got to step our game up and, like, move forward. And and then Jesse brought the Monarchs in 14, and we kind of made him step his game up, and it started bringing it to where, okay, we can't just go out there with like uniforms that are ripped apart and like no social media presence. And I think our mark on the league was good for the league. I think we made it grow to where it is now. Like, there wasn't teams bringing in guys and like putting these teams together that is like high quality football. Like, not everybody knows about it, but when you go to a game where it was the Monarchs versus the Bucks, or Bucks Gators, or Gators Monarchs, like, there was high level football being played, man. Like, there was games where, I mean, there's freaking Cassidy Donoff, one of our receivers, like, he was a freaking captain on the CFL team, like won the I forget, like, whatever the Heisman Trophy for junior football, the Wally Buono Award or whatever, like, won that for the Colts. Like, those kind of players were in the league for a good stretch of when we were there. And, I think it elevated the league. And, there's been little dips, ups and downs. And, I think the league is going to be strong this year. It sucks Brandon is not playing. Like, I think that's good for the league in general. Like, I think the Bucks were going to run away with it if Brandon played. Like, I think it would have been tough. Like, the Jets are good. I watched a lot of games. I watched the Jets versus the Irish. It would have been tough. Like, I like that quarterback that's going to play in Sweden or whatever. Good quarterback. I think he's going to really do well in American football just for his size and the way he plays. I think he'll be way better in that style. I think the Bucks, with their nucleus of offense going up against those guys, I think they would have beat that team last year too. And I mean, it's a hypothetical, and I don't mean to be a dick, but I honestly think the Bucks kind of offense, the way Brandon plays and Ben and those kind of guys around him, I think the league is pretty lucky. Other than the Bucks, they're not lucky, but they're lucky that he's not playing. And I heard you guys talking about Connor. That sucks. I still think they're going to be fine. I think their team is more. I personally, just real quick before we go too, I actually talked with Anton about being the OC last year for them, because I live in Airdrie, and they went with a guy that Anton coached with. He's a bit more of an old school guy, and they kind of run a much more condensed and very, very simple, just like very basic stuff. And my worry with them, when I talked to them, I talked to their quarterback and I talked to Anton, and through a Zoom chat, we like had a little interview. And I told him, I said, dude, you should be spreading the field out, leaving lanes for you to run, and just run like spread option stuff. Like, that would be really good for you. But they run it very condensed. They run a lot of I-form stuff, which suited Connor pretty good. I think he probably would have still been fine in more of a spread offense. But the worry I have with a team like the Irish, when they play defenses like the Jets and they run that super basic, like 21, like slant now kind of Daryl Eason offense, those teams, that's so Teej, you know, as a DB, that if that is a dream for you, because you can read those offenses. You've been reading those type of offenses since you were a kid.
Yeah.
So Daryl got away with it because Daryl would put the ball in places and just was so fast with it. He's losing it a bit now just because he's fucking 60 years old. But Daryl would put balls in places where you couldn't defend it. But that's not really this quarterback's game, his game. So even if he doesn't get hurt last year, I still don't think they had a chance versus the Jets, just because when you get into those high level games, you can't just run double slants and slant out and like those very cookie cutter type of offenses and expect a defense not to be able to read it like the back of their hand.
No, you got to be able to push it. You got to be able to push the defense. And the Jets had a ton of guys that were just, I mean, when you got athletic DBs like they had, Desron Kerr and Teague Sherman, like they're hoping you run little rub routes like that, right? Like that's right into their repertoire. So
well, don't get me wrong. Look at in 21, those same guys. I know the Jets defense definitely got better for sure, but they had a lot of that nucleus was playing for the Jets the year before. Now, granted, their offense was better last year than it was in 21 when we played them. But defensively, all those guys were there. And Brandon was to attack them and put up big numbers against those guys.
No, we absolutely, we went ham on them. I fully believe that too. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but I feel like Brandon Lay is kind of that X factor, and with all the weapons we have come back, and we've got some new weapons like I've talked about, and a kid named Ruben Brayton back, and our receiving core is going to be really good this year. So we had our first indoor workout today with our new quarterback, and he was slinging it really well. There's not a lot of arm strength difference between him and Brandon. He's young, he's really young. He doesn't have the experience, obviously, even close to what Brandon has, but he's going to be good, and people should watch out. Okay, so we have had a lot of great conversations. There's actually a lot more stuff we want to talk about, but Buzzsprout, my podcast platform, doesn't really like me going over an hour and a half. Or they start charging me money. So we're gonna have you on again, Kurt, because I know there's more stuff. And the next time we have you come on, we'll get some fan questions and some league questions too. I didn't want to do that this time because I know we had a lot of stuff that we pre-planned that we wanted to talk about. So, really thank you for taking this time and for talking and willing to talk about your time in the AFL. And I was fascinated this whole time, and I know Omar, you probably were too. And I'm sure, and I hope the people are that are listening. So just thank you, Kurt. I appreciate that a lot.
No problem. And when you announced it, I guess last podcast maybe, so a couple people contacted me about me being on. So didn't get to talk about everything. A couple stories guys told me. Some stuff I was like, oh, that's a little too much. But everybody that reached out, sorry, I was, just shouting you out now. I appreciate it.
We'll get them next time. We'll let's get some questions. We'll kind of have the next episode. We'll talk about like one of the things or two of the things we didn't talk about this time, and then we'll get some people in because that's great. That's if people want to ask questions. That's what this podcast is about. Omari, send us off.
Yeah, appreciate everyone tuning in. You can check us out on your local podcast platform, Apple Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and there's a bunch of others. Feel free to give us a like, share, comment, subscribe if you listen to us on YouTube. I think things are growing, things are building up for the 2023 season. All I'm hearing is a lot of excitement and a lot of talents just looking forward, chomping at the bit to get playing here in June. I know in the beginning we mentioned about the AFL league camp. Definitely have conversation with your guys, have conversations on the communal platforms like Facebook, and just gauge interest there, because that might be something that the league could look at or not and see. But any ideas, anything that you guys want to talk about, please let us know personally or on the podcast or on our Instagram page and go from there. But other than that, that's everything from me.
Awesome. Thanks, Omari. Thanks, Kurt. Have a good night, boys.
Take it easy, fellas.